here. Got a lot of people out of town, but we're going to have a good time with who's here today, all right? I'm going to talk today and in 2 weeks about the fight for the young people. I want you to think of somebody you know, child, teenager, maybe even college student. Could be your child, could be a grandchild, could be a great-grandchild, could be a neighbor you're really fond of or friend. Are you willing to fight for them? That's thought. Are you willing to fight for them? If you love them, you are. You're willing to fight for them. That's what I'm talking about, to fight for the young people. Let me read these verses where God is speaking in Jeremiah 32. They have built pagan shrines to Baal in the valley of Ben Hinnom, and there they sacrifice their sons and daughters to Molech. I have never commanded such a horrible deed. It never even crossed my mind to command such a thing. What an incredible evil, causing Judah to sin so greatly. They offered their children as burnt sacrifices to the god Molech. When archaeologists went to the city of Carthage and they dug out where some people worshiped the god Baal, 500 children had been burnt as burnt sacrifice at one time. Maybe they thought they'd get better crops or more money, but they gave their own children to a false god and burnt them as a sacrifice. And God says, I can't even believe that you do that to your children. I first preached this twice before. I preached it at my church in Delaware in the 90s. And in 99, I was invited to preach a revival outside of Nashville here at New Hope Church in Jolton. Didn't know I'd be moving to Nashville the next year. I preached this message, the fight for the children, I don't know, at night, that spring of 99. And the next day I stayed at somebody's house in the church. I didn't watch any TV. I came to church and I heard them talking. Boy, he sure got it right last night about the attack on the children. Did you hear that? And so I asked him, well, what's going on? He said, did you hear? 2 students went into Columbine High School in Colorado and killed a bunch of their fellow students and one teacher. And that's what I'm talking about. Since then, we've had a lot more school shootings, which is terrible. But we have more attacks than that on our children. They're targeted by the conspiracy of the evil one. Many children, many teenagers, college students today are insecure. Their hearts are already hardened at a young age, many of them. They have a disbelief about God at an early age now. They think that Christians are mean and they don't even really know that much about us. They have a distrust in many and authority. They're confused about sex. They're confused about life. And there's a battle today for our young people. Sandy was a curriculum writer for Sunday school for many years, also worked for Randall House Publishing Curriculum. She went to a conference one time where a guy named Josh McDowell, getting old now, one of my favorites, Josh McDowell. And he's been working with young people and college students for years. He said, you need to adjust what you think the age to start teaching apologetics and these issues about life are, because it's so much earlier now. And he said this, he said, my suggestion is for youth pastors to take half their budget and put it to 4th through 7th grade ministries, training kids to be healthy emotionally and think critically about their faith. 4th grade. He's saying children are much younger now. We used to think, well, the college-age students, that's when they lost their faith. Then we thought it was a high school. Now 10-year-olds are debating what gender they are, what they believe about God, and how they don't like the church. 10-year-olds are hearing this stuff. And if you have a 4th grader anywhere, it's not time to get concerned about them someday in the future. It's right now, of course, when they're born. So we need to understand the assault on young people already today. So I'm going to talk about 2 weeks the Lord wants the young people. Today I'm going to talk about the devil wants the young people. In 1 Peter 5 it says, stay alert. Watch out for your great enemy, the devil. He prowls around like a roaring lion looking for someone to devour. Spiritual warfare, the devil. Now, I got a picture here. It's a real picture. That is a kite in Taiwan 2 years ago at a kite festival. Some parents had their 3-year-old daughter standing beside them with a big kite. And you can see how big a kite it is. Look how long it is. That's the 3-year-old. It caught her and went up in the air over 100 feet in the air just while didn't even realize it happened. And there's their 3-year-old daughter 100 feet in the air hooked to a kite. That's a 10-story building, 100 feet. They did pull the thing down carefully and she fell a little bit. She wasn't even hurt. That's the good story. What I'm trying to say is we don't realize today our kids can be snatched up by the devil away from us even when they're in our own homes. They're getting, so much stuff is coming into our homes. Or you say, well, I don't let them get on a computer. If parents today don't let them get on a computer, they're rare. But if they don't, that doesn't mean their friends at school don't get on computers and don't have cell phones, because some parents are giving their children cell phones where they can access anything. And they're showing it to kids who are snatched up, just like this little girl with a kite. So we need to be realizing we are in a fight, whether we think so or not. Let's read another verse that Jesus said, if you cause one of these little ones, and this is when he took up a child in his arms, all right, in Matthew 18. If you cause one of these little ones who trust in me to fall into sin, it'd be better for you to have a large millstone tied around your neck and be drowned in the depths of the sea. Do you think Jesus sounds just a little bit upset, a little bit serious about how we treat children? Of course he is. Of course he is. And we should be serious about it too. If we believe we are in a spiritual warfare, we know that our children are born into a war zone. We think someday when they get into college, we got to pray for them. We got to pray for them and model it and be careful right from the beginning of what comes into their little brains. So that's what we're going to talk about today. The devil wants the young people, and here's some of Satan's attacks, just some. There's many more. Drugs and alcohol is an attack. Of course, it's bad for everybody, but it's certainly an attack on young people. First of all, it is abused by parents. See, when parents abuse drugs and alcohol, and they have children, that's who gets hurt the worst, the children. And that's happening not in thousands, not in tens of thousands, but in millions of homes of parents who are addicts. I know that personally. Some of you probably do too, having an addict you grew up with. But I remember when I preached in Illinois several years ago at a Sunday night service. Sandy was with the pastor's wife. I went to the office with the pastor, and there was a picture of a little boy, looked like 5 or 6 years old there. And I said, "Oh, is that your son?" And he had this real serious, quiet look, and he said, "No." He said, "That was our foster son for a while." He said, "We were watching him. His parents were addicts, but they finally said they cleaned up, and they sent the boy back with the parents." But you know what happens a lot, and I think that's good. That's what you want to do. You want the parents to raise their own children. But after a while, they got back into addiction, neglecting the little boy. He went out in the backyard, and their own dogs killed that little boy. The police came. Policemen went to kill one of the dogs that killed a boy, which is that you do that. And the man, the father, coming out of his drunkenness or whatever, said, "Don't kill my dogs." And the policeman pointed the gun at him and said, "I'm going to kill the dogs or you. Which one do you want?" Now, I know policemen are not supposed to do that, but can you blame him? When parents neglect their own children, now I know that can happen even if you're not, but this is because of neglect, because of addictions. And addiction hurts a lot of children in our country, in our world today. It's also abused by young people. They found out that it's high among high school students are drinking now. Underage drinking, according to the CDC, is responsible for about 4,000 deaths every year, underage drinking, and 250,000 potential life years lost because of that. In the last week, about a third of underage children or teenagers drank alcohol. 14% binge drank, which is a really big danger, drinking in binges, too much at once. 5% drove after drinking alcohol. This is underage, under 18 or under 21. And 17% rode with a driver who had been drinking alcohol, which means you better watch who your kids ride with, because that is a real danger, drinking and driving. There are 15 million plus, according to USA Today, 15 million plus alcoholics in the U.S. That's a big number. That means 1 out of 20 people you know, one of them could be an alcoholic. According to USA Today, alcohol kills more Americans each year than drug overdoses do. See, we think, well, we don't want our kids to get in drugs. We're not worried about that. So I'm not worried about it. I just want you to understand I'm not worried about that, okay? That's children. And we should be worried about drug overdoses. But there's more killed by alcohol, and we think that's not a problem. So we need to be careful of that too. I got a picture of a young man 1 year ago, last October. This man a young man named Danny Santulli, went to the University of Missouri. Probably had all his dreams of what he was going to do with his life, but he wanted to be in a fraternity. They had a hazing for him. They went down to the basement of the frat house, and he said, here's what you got to do. You got to drink this bottle of vodka real quick. And as soon as he would stop, they'd say, no, they didn't make fun of him. Drink, keep drinking, keep drinking. He drank that until he passed out on the couch. Then they said, wait a minute, he's not moving. He's not breathing. They took him to the ER. They got him breathing again. But today, 1 year later, he's at home with his parents with permanent brain damage. He cannot talk. He cannot walk. He cannot see. Probably like that the rest of his life because of one binge drink episode. And this is not the only time stuff like that happens, unfortunately. When we were in Delaware, Sandy taught homebound children. She taught one young lady who was considered an alcoholic at age 9. The government said she was an alcoholic at age 9. Which begs the question, who's giving her alcohol at age 9? Young people even are binge drinking, and it's hurting them, and sometimes forever. One more bad story, and I hate to tell all these, I hate to be negative, but sometimes we got to know the negative to get into the positive. And I read this, it's been 20 years ago, but it's still I still remember it. A 15-year-old boy in Plano, Texas, outside of Dallas, was hooked on drugs. Went to a drug treatment center, stayed there for a while, said he was clean, came back. And the story, the father brought him and sort of tucked him in bed. He hadn't been home for a while. And they had a good conversation. The boy was all clear-eyed and clean. And he said, I love you, son. And he said, I love you, Dad. In the middle of the night, he woke up. He just had a strange feeling. I better check on him. He went in there and looked. He said, I don't think he's moving. Somebody, one friend of his, had came in through the window, gave him drugs. He had OD'd on drugs the very night that he came back from the drug treatment center, and his last words were, I love you, Dad. And you know what? I think he did love him. But still, this is happening in Wilson County too. We're not immune to this stuff. It's happening around us, and we need to understand kids are dying. Kids are being changed forever. Lives are hurt because of things like this. The second thing is sexual confusion. Wow, is there ever a time of sexual confusion like now? I don't think so. Let me talk first about, and this is the thing that Josh McDowell, I got all this from him. He did this gigantic survey. It's probably the biggest one ever on porn addiction and the use of porn in America and the world. And he said every 24 hours, more than 2.5 billion pornographic emails are distributed. 2.5 billion with a B every day. Nearly 60% of all website visits are sexual in nature. We are consumed with sex in America. And you watch the TV now, and the movies, and people meet for the very first time. They go out to eat, and they immediately go home and have sex. The very first time they ever met each other. And this is supposed to be normal. And we're supposed to say, well, you know, as if it is normal and good. And this is at 60% on the internet. The number of porn websites, 26 million. 26 million porn websites. The number of porn pages, 2 billion. One porn website alone can produce 29 petabytes of data in 1 month. That's 1 million gigabytes. In other words, one website out of 26 million in the last 30 days, in the last month, has produced pornography that would fill 540 million 4-drawer file cabinets or 29 Empire State Buildings in 1 month, and that's one website. Porn is gigantic in the world. 6 out of 10 girls are exposed to porn before the age 18. 9 out of 10 boys are exposed to porn before age 18. And so people, you know, they've lost meaning and what sex really means or what life really means, and now they have this temptation before them, and it's hitting our young people. And I like this quote. I don't like it, but I like it. He says, maybe they won't look for pornography, but pornography is looking for them, and it will find your child. Ouch. And some say, well, you know, it's all right, a little bit. I mean, if they just see a, you know, topless woman, what's that going to hurt? It's a lot deeper than that. It's terrible, and I'm not even going to get into it. I'm not going to describe it, but it's a lot more than that. And even if you don't, and I certainly, and I'm going to talk a little bit about it in a couple of weeks, but we have responsibility with our children and our grandchildren to make sure that they're not getting it in our home, which is where a lot of that happens. I mean, it's piping right into your house. If you let them get on the internet without supervision, they just naturally, it comes up. They didn't even look for it, and it comes up a link to it, and then they're curious, obviously, and there they go. And even if they don't have that, then they will find somebody, a friend somewhere that does. This is from a group called Protect Young Eyes, 5 ways that pornography impacts children and teens. Pornography harms a child's brain. It actually changes neural pathways. It changes their brain because their brain is still being formed and what they think about. And now we're putting these kind of thoughts in their brains now, which most of us never even had the opportunity to do. But now it's there in their own home. Pornography harms a child's view of sex. See, they think that's what real life is, what they see on the screen, and it's not. It harms a child's view of people. It leads to objectification, diminishes our ability to see real people. Pornography harms a child's quality of life. It's a suprastormal stimulus, so they can't stop watching. Pornography causes children to harm other children. When young kids see pornography, they practice pornography on other children. So, I'm trying to say pornography is not a victimless thing. It's not a neutral thing. It's not something we should be, oh, don't be such a fuddy-duddy, Richard. I'm talking about harming people so that some people say that pornography leads to the divorce in 2/3 of marriages. Not that that's the only thing, but it hinders. It's hindering their marriage, or relationship with the opposite sex, or a relationship with God. It's not a victimless thing, and we certainly need to protect our children from it. It's just all over these kind of things. And there's confusion then, of course, about whether they're even boys or girls, because I think this pornography leads into a lot of that. And they hear whether you don't have to be a boy or a girl, you can be the opposite or something else. I think it was this week, a parent tore into her school board because they recommended a book on gay sex to 7th graders, that they should read this. She read out what was in the book and adults were holding their ears. Now, I'm not talking about for censorship in the general, but book banning in school, yeah, some books should be banned. Children should not be exposed to some of those. And parents have an absolute right to say, I don't want public schools to teach this to my children. And yet some people think that the parents should not have that responsibility or have any say-so. And I say we will not turn from that. We will not be intimidated by governments and other people who want to take over what our children are taught. We need to stand up for something. There's also groups that want to abolish the age of consent for laws for sexual relations with minors. There are actual groups who say that it ought to be all right if I have this desire that I'm able to do this with children. And they're not even hiding it. They're proud of it. This is what's happening today. In America, in Nashville. One man, Joseph Gobrick, was recently convicted on child pornography. Went to arrest him. They found an 8-year-old girl had been missing in his house. When he went to court, he told the judge, well, the reason is I identify as an 8-year-old girl. You can say whatever you want. You can identify as whatever you want. Another man in the Netherlands went and said that he identified as 20 years younger. He wanted to change the date of his birth. He said, if they can identify that, I'm going to change it 20 years so I can get more dates on the internet. And the judge said, well, I guess, I've got to consider that. If you can change your sex, you can change your birth date. BBC resource for children ages 9 to 12, British Broadcasting, claims there are over 100 gender identities, and that is really exciting. I should have looked at where do you come up with 100 gender identities? Now I know our society, and I know we're looked at as mean because we want to say people shouldn't do this. I'm trying not to go out and be just the guy who's against everything. But on the other hand, we don't have to just go along with insanity. We do not have to go along. Christians from the beginning have been countercultural. And here's a time where we need to be countercultural if we have to. God created male and female, and we should go along with what God said. This man here in Canada, the father, Robert Hoogland from Surrey, British Columbia, has a 14-year-old daughter who told somebody at school she wanted to be a boy. So the government went ahead and started, without parental consent, started transitioning her to a guy. And the judge said this, that the father, the court said, either parents could not refer to her by using female pronouns or addressing her by her birth name. They would be considered guilty of family violence. Quote. Family violence if they called her by the name they gave her, or if they said she is doing this. He refused to do it, and he went to jail for not calling his own daughter a boy. Went to jail. Now, we don't let children decide if they want to go to the dentist or not. You're going. We don't let them decide if they're going to school or not. We don't let children have an age of, say that they can have relationships with an adult. We call that statutory rape. By statute, if somebody, even if the child says, yes, I do it, they're not old enough to give consent, but now we say they're old enough to give consent to transitioning to another gender without parental consent. I say that is child abuse. It is wrong. And there are a whole lot of people now who adults are detransitioning and regretting and said, I wish somebody would have not let that happen to me. Now, when they're adults, they can do what they want. But I say we should not let this happen to children. And you saw Vanderbilt got caught with a little video where they said, we can make boatloads of money on this transgender. As young as 13 and 14 without their permission. And they got called in the video. Now they said they've suspended for a while. I bet they'll start it again soon. That's here, Vanderbilt Hospital. So, this is the culture our young people in, where they grow up and they're at school, everybody's saying, well, you don't have to stay a boy, you can be a girl. Or you don't have to stay a girl, you can be a boy. And young people, they're still trying to learn what life is like and what is right. They don't know. Which is why we have to really be careful and start teaching them these things. Gender confusion. I'll end right there on that one. Number 3, a culture of no established truth. That everybody can believe what they want to believe. We are taught that we are animals, so why shouldn't we do whatever we want if there's no God? And also that we're in an era of post-truth, where everybody has their own truth. And you hear that. This is your truth, and this is my truth. Everybody has their own truth. So much so that a few people now say that if you say 2 + 2 = 4, that is racist. The objectivity of math is equated with white supremacy culture in the mathematics classroom. The focus on getting the right answer and teaching math in a linear fashion is deemed oppressive. And I'm quoting. 2 + 2 = 4 is racist. How do you make things go in a society that talks stupid like this? And we're afraid to call it stupid. It's stupid. 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 Hope you don't cancel me, YouTube. We can't let that get by, or it goes on, and the young people say, well, I guess they're right. A culture of no established truth. And so pastors in some churches say, well, they say things like this, well, I don't like to teach doctrine. It's divisive. Well, of course it is. All the way from back to the beginning, it's been divisive. Jesus said, your own family is going to be divided over me. It is divisive to teach the truth. But somebody said to one of these pastors, when he said, I just have praise and worship because I don't want to have division, he said, well, how do you know who to praise and worship if you're not teaching doctrine? I know I'm sounding negative today, and I don't like to be like this. But we have to stand up for the truth, or we're nothing. We've got nothing. So we cannot go along with the post-truth. There is a truth. Let's stand on that. One more quote by Josh McDowell. I think I have it. We are no longer live and minister in a post-Judeo-Christian culture. We live in an anti-Judeo-Christian culture. You know why a lot of young people are now saying they're nuns, they don't have any established religion? Because they are taught that we are hateful. That we hate people. I don't hate people who transition. I certainly don't hate these young people who are confused and taught these lies. I do not hate them because we want to stand up for the truth. We know that's what's best for them. We need to understand where we are now. Number 4, a throwaway mentality. Sandy and I led camp for years when we were in Delaware. We had a guy, a former captain in the Army, retired, he did a nature center for us and also taught them all kind of nature things. Great guy, Ray Fender, a good friend of mine. One year, somebody gave him a baby doe that the mother had been killed in a car wreck, so they took the baby, the unborn fawn, and he wanted to show that because it was a perfectly fine, and was able to show it at a nature center, a perfect little deer. But he had to get 4 federal permits in order to do that, in order to show an unborn baby deer. Whereas you can take human babies, well, you know. You can cut them up and throw them away. And it happens all the time. I know there's a big debate on this. And I know there's part of saying, well, some women, we got to think about the women, and we do. I do want to help them, but I do think if we say the issue is a part of a woman's body. Any part of a woman's body, she'll do what she wants. But we know more now today than we've ever known it. From the very beginning, it has its own DNA. That When we went to see my daughter last week, we didn't say, how's the fetus doing? You know, it's how's the baby? They just went and had a doctor's appointment. If that is a human person, and if you believe it's not a human person until it heart beats or feels pain or moves around, kicks, whatever, at least if you believe it's a human, then when we take that and kill it, we're killing a precious human person. And we have a throwaway mentality. Not just for, I don't want a kid, but even after they're born, I don't want a kid. And a lot of children's home are not, their parents are still alive somewhere, but they don't want them. Kids are a bother. They're a problem. And I know they're expensive, and they do take time. But more and more we're getting an attitude, a mentality of a throwaway mentality. They're too much trouble, and I don't want them. And that's harming our children. Number 5, lack of love and stability. A lot of homes is no stability because of one reason or another, and no love. And love for many kids is spelled T-I-M-E. Time. And a lot of kids are just have nobody who's just watching over them, nobody who cares, and that's sad. And they have trouble all their life having a relationship with other people and even with God. We all understand. You understand the moral of the 3 little pigs. You remember the 3 little pigs? One pig built his house out of straw. Well, the wolf pulled that down. One built his out of sticks. Wolf let it down. The other one took time, built out of bricks, and it lasted. The structure of the home helps on its reliability and how it's going to do over time. So we need to make sure our homes, we take time with children and grandchildren and nieces and nephews and neighbors, anybody we can have influence, anybody somehow that will let us have a good influence on them for Jesus and right. Then we're there to help them. Peer pressure is number 6. We know that's real. We know peer pressure is real for all adults, but certainly for children who are trying to figure out their way. Which way do I live? Well, this is the way that everybody else is doing it. I guess that's the way I do it. Peer pressure. Friends and social culture have a big influence over our youth, which is why parents need to understand their responsibility. And this is what another thing that gets me on some TV shows. It's like that junior high student goes in his own room or her own room and closes the door and gets on the phone and gets on the computer, and mom or dad has you don't have permission. Bam! You have no more door. You think I have 4 kids. You think I'll let them tell me stuff like that? I'm the parent, you're the kid. When you grow up, you do what you want. You ask either 4 of them, of which I have a great relationship with all 4 today. Parents don't just they have a responsibility from God to see what's happening, influencing their children. Yes, they've heard their friend or they've heard it on TV that you shouldn't be spying on what they have on the internet. Well, tough stuff. I'm going to know exactly what you've seen on the internet and who you're talking to and where you're going and who you're going with. I told myself this morning again before I preach, Richard, don't get mad. And I'm trying. But this kind of stuff gets me that we see all over. Like we can't do anything with our children. And the government's backing them up some of this, which gets me, and school boards are backing them up in that. Number 7, despair. This is the sad, that some young people don't even have any hope. Instead of looking at the bright future that's all open to them, they don't even have any hope. Now, I know when I talk about these things, I'm not talking about all young people. We got a lot of great young people out there trying to do it. I'm not talking about all young people. Let's look at this. Every 2 hours and 11 minutes, a person under the age of 25 dies by suicide. That's in America. which means every 10 people a day are killing themselves. Unfortunately, it's been going even more to younger people. About a tenth of those are under 13. They're 12-year-olds, 11-year-olds, 10-year-olds. Killing themselves. They maybe got bullied at school. Somebody called them something on social media. And they get distraught. They don't even realize what they're doing when they take their own life that they only have one of. They're in despair. It's the third leading cause of death. 1 in 7 considered suicide this last year. 1 in 14 attempted it. It's also a fact that girls profess to think about suicide a lot more than boys. But boys succeed at suicide a lot more than girls. Girls generally take too many pills and then they wake up. Boys shoot themselves and they die. Despair. Despair. The devil loves to mix them all up and they say, you don't even have any hope. Despair. There is a spiritual warfare. They're in a war zone. There is a spiritual warfare for the hearts and the minds of young people. The devil wants the young people. But the Lord wants them too. We'll talk about that in 2 weeks. But God help us to get in the fight. To not stand by passively and say, well, this is the way culture's going now. Somebody's got to get in the fight for the young people. God, let it be us.